All right, so with that said, we're going to look in this final segment at the rights of children, and we're going to talk more, we're going to focus basically on raising children. Raising children, particularly in an un-Islamic environment. Raising children, because that's something which is very pertinent to all of us, how to raise children Islamically in an un-Islamic environment. Why should we be interested in this topic? Why is this topic important, worthy of discussing? Well, for one reason, because it's part of the religion. So the first reason why it's important, it's part of the deen. Anything part of the deen is important. Anything which is a knowledge that we need to know is something we should concern ourselves with and we should be interested in. As the Prophet said in the hadith, collected by Ibn Majah, on the authority of Anas, طَلَبُ الْعِلْمِ فَرِيضَةٌ عَلَى كُلِّ مُسْلِمٍ. Seeking knowledge is obligatory upon every Muslim. What knowledge? The knowledge which you as a Muslim, because of your circumstances, cannot be ignorant of. The knowledge of the things that you as a Muslim, because of your circumstances, cannot be ignorant of. So if there's something in the deen that you have to know it because it affects you, you have to study that knowledge. So for example, if you're a rich man and you have to pay zakat, you have to know what? You have to know the ins and outs of zakat. And if you're a parent and you have to raise your children the way Allah wants you to raise them, then you have to know what? You have to know something about Islamic tarbiyah and the requirements of raising children in Islam. The second reason why this is important is because the stakes are so high. Because the stakes are so high. The reality of Islam in America is that we're losing our youth. We are losing our youth. How many young people you see in this masjid? And I'm not talking about 10-year-olds. I'm talking about young people, young adults, teenagers, between 13 and 20. How many? One. And there may be a few sisters in the back. طيب, most young people, 13 to 20, do not attend the masjid. Do not attend the masjid. Most of them do not pray. Many of them have girlfriends or boyfriends. Some of them, and not a small number, experiment with drugs, alcohol, and alternative lifestyles. Many of them associate with irreligious and immoral people, and some of them in certain parts of the United States join gangs, and a large number of them have committed major crimes which have landed them in prison. And who bears the responsibility for all of that? Primarily the parents. As the Prophet said in the hadith, كُلُّكُمْ رَاعٍ وَكُلُّكُمْ مَسْئُولٌ عَنْ رَعِيَّتِهِ. He said, all of you are shepherds. And each and every one of you is going to be responsible, held accountable for his flock. We also have the statement of Ibn al-Qayyim, in which he said, وَكَمْ مِمَّنْ أَشْقَى وَلَدَهُ وَفَلَدَةَ كَبْدِهِ فِي الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ بِإِهْمَالِهِ وَتَرْكِ تَأْدِيبِهِ وَإِعَانَتِهِ عَلَى شَهْوَاتِهِ وهو بذلك يزعم أنه يكرمه وقد أهانه ويرحمه وقد ظلمه وإذا اعتبرت الفساد في الأولاد رأيت عامته من قبل الآباء. Ibn al-Qayyim, he said, and how numerous are those parents who have who have caused their own child's misery by neglecting him and failing to discipline him, while aiding and abetting him in the fulfillment of his impermissible desires. He thinks that he has honored him. Oh, I'm such a good father because I give my child, buy him the newest shoes and the nicest clothes and the newest technology. I'm such a good father, and wherever he wants to go, I let him go. Whatever he wants to do, I let him do. I'm such a good father. He thinks he has honored him. وَقَدْ أَهَانَ. In reality, he has humiliated him. He thinks he has been merciful to him. I'm so compassionate. وَقَدْ ظَلَمَ. He has oppressed him. Then he goes on to say, Ibn al-Qayyim, he says, وَإِذَا تَبَرْتَ الْفَسَادِ فِي الْأَوْلَادِ. He said, if you consider the corruption found in children, رَأَيْتَ عَامَّتَهُ مِنْ قِبْلِ الْآبَاءِ. You will find that most of it comes from what? Comes from their parents. It's the doing of their parents. So we bear the responsibility, especially if we haven't done our job. We haven't done our due diligence. So that's why this topic is so important, to teach us how what we should be doing. Another reason why this is so important, this topic is so important, is because many parents feel lost. They feel helpless, even if they refuse to admit it. Everybody wants to act like what? They got everything under control, but really they don't. They're freaking out, but they won't say it. They feel helpless. They feel that, I'm losing my grip. I don't know what to do. And so a lecture like this can do what? Can help us figure out what we're supposed to be doing. That's why this subject is so important. That's why we need to talk about this. Because it will give us direction. Those of us who feel lost, it will give us what? Give us direction. It'll illuminate the tariq. So what are we going to do today? What we're going to do is we're going to discuss this topic, but we're going to do it in consideration of what? The stages of child development. And I basically made it 5 stages. And what we're going to talk about is what we should be doing as parents in each of the five stages. Anybody want to guess what the stages are? Take a stab at it. What do you think the first stage of child development is? Ahsan, before they're even conceived. The first stage of child development before they're even what? Conceived. Second one, before they're what? Born. طيب, third one, from the time that they're born until they reach the age of what? Discernment. What they call tamyiz. Number 4, once they reach discernment, until what? Until they become young adults. And that stage is the most critical stage, because that's when the child who you've been what? Molding like clay goes where? Into the oven. And you can't make any what? Any changes after that. And then last but not least is when they become what? When they reach young adulthood. Still got a parent. Young adulthood, you still have to parent. 5 stages. Do I need to repeat those, or we got those? The first one, before children are even conceived. Number 2, conceived before they're born. Number 3, born until they reach discernment. Number 4, discernment to young adulthood. And last but not least, once they reach what? Young adulthood. Until they leave the home, and even after they leave the home, you still got to what? Still got a parent. Discernment tamyiz, so they reach like the age of maturity where they can have a niyyah, they can have intention. All right, so let's start with stage number 1. Before conception. So what do you do before conception? Choose a good partner. You want to have good children? It starts with your partner. Why is that the case? Because spouses have a great deal of influence on each other, and ultimately on what? The children are going to have. The Prophet said the hadith, Al-mar'u ala dini khalili. فَلْيَنْظُرْ أَحَدُكُمْ مَنْ يُخَالِلُ. He said, a person will follow the faith of his closest companion. So be careful with whom you associate. Like, if this is true for someone you see 3 or 4 times a week for a few hours a day, they can what? Have that amount of influence on you. How about someone you see what? Every day, and you share your bed with them? They certainly can do what? Influence you. They can certainly influence you. Have you ever in your life known someone who before they were married, they were very committed? They marry someone who's not as committed and they become less committed? I've seen that. Let me see if you've seen that. So show of hands if you've seen that. So committed. Marry someone less committed, become what? Less committed. There's a famous example in the books of hadith, the books of Rijal, and they mention the story. They mention the story. I have to try to remember his name. Al-Muhim, I thought I had it written here, I'm sorry. But Al-Muhim, I'll try to remember it. Basically, the story is about a particular man, a scholar, who is one of the ruwat, one of the narrators of the hadith in Bukhari. This particular guy, he was a great scholar of hadith, very knowledgeable person, and he was dhamim. Dhamim means he was unattractive, he was homely. Okay? Had a hard time finding a spouse. And there was a particularly strikingly beautiful woman who was from the followers of the method of the Khawarij. You guys know what Khawarij is? Khawarij is like ISIS. Okay? If you know ISIS, you know the Khawarij. Like that. Okay? So she was a particularly vocal member of a particular chapter of the Khawarij. Activist for the Khawarij. And he was obviously attracted to her because of her beauty. And he thought, I will marry her. I will marry her and convert her to the madhab of Ahl Sunnah. I know I have it here because I read it in my notes last week. All right, Al-Muhim. So he married her and she agreed to marry him. And then over time, she started to influence him until he left the religion of Ahl Sunnah, the people of Sunnah, and began to follow the madhab of Al-Khawarij. And this is narrated about him in the books of what? Al-Rijal. So his wife, instead of him being able to influence her, she influenced him and turned him away from what? A Sunnah to what? Al-Bid'ah. So this is the effect that spouses can have on what? On each other. Also, it's important to choose a good spouse because children inherit qualities from their parents. Okay? So basically, if the parents are introverted, you'll find that the child will be very what? Introverted. If the parents are very what? Quiet and reserved, the child will be what? Quiet and reserved. Parents are really responsible. The child will be what? Responsible. Parents are very what? Clean. Okay? Very hygienic people. Child will be what? Very clean. Okay? Parents are a little bit vain. Child will be what? Vain. Talkative, right? Selfish, proud, argumentative. All these qualities he'll what? Inherit in many cases from what? From the parents. That's why people say things like, you are your father's what? You're your father's child, right? They inherit what? Those qualities. You got to choose a good spouse so they get what? They inherit good qualities. Also, children have a tendency to what? Imitate their parents' behavior. So if the parents are, for example, they have a tendency to be verbally abusive. Okay? You have a child who tends to say what? Say whatever comes to his mind and say some very what? Cruel things. And it's not uncommon for a child, for example, in school to say cruel things to the point that his parents have to be summoned to the school to basically explain, where the child is getting this from and, what can we do to rectify the child's behavior? And lo and behold, what? The parents talk the same way. Now you know, okay, this is where it's coming from, right? So it's another reason why you have to choose a good spouse, because children will imitate. They'll do what they see. They'll do what they see. So what should we be looking for? You choose a spouse because spouses influence us, children inherit their qualities, children imitate them. So what should we be looking for in a spouse? Number one, you should be looking for religion. Top priority. I got a list of things I'm looking for in a wife, list of things I'm looking for in a husband. Number one on that list should be what? Deen. The Prophet said in the hadith, he said, تُنْكَحُ الْمَرْأَةِ لِأَرْبَعٍ. A woman is married for one of four things. غالبا, usually a woman, when a man marries her, he married her because of what? One of four things. He said, لِجَمَالِهَا, her beauty. وَلِمَالِهَا, her wealth. وَلِحَسَبِهَا, her social status. وَلِدِينِهَا, her religion. Then he said, فَاظْفَرْ بِذَاتِ الدِّينِ تَرِبَتْ يَدَاكَ. He said, get the religious one or you'll be the loser. Get the religious one or what? Or you'll be the loser. He also said, and this is, the first one's talking about women, but it also applies to what? Men. What should a woman be looking for in a husband? Look for a religious man, first and foremost. Don't look for his degree, his credentials. What did he specialize in? Is he Punjabi, or is he, don't put those things before what? Before the deen. The Prophet said in the hadith, إن جاءكم من ترضون دينه وخلقه فزوجوه إلا تفعلوا تكن فتنة في الأرض وفساد عريض. He said, if a person comes, a young man comes, and you are satisfied with his character and his religion, then marry him off. Marry your daughter to him. Don't hesitate. Pull the trigger. If you don't, تَكُنْ فِتْنَةٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ, there will be great what? Tribulation in the earth. وَفَسَادٌ عَرِيضٌ, and great corruption. And wallahi, we're living that right now. Because people are looking for anything and everything other than what? Deen. For example, they'll have these in the classifieds, you'll have people who will put an ad looking for a partner for their son or daughter in marriage. And they'll say, they'll say wealthy, and I'm not picking on anyone, just bear with me, wealthy Indian family, or wealthy Indian Punjabi family, right, is looking for a young man for their educated daughter who is an engineer. No, they won't even just say engineer. They'll say, for example, chemical engineer. They actually specialize. They'll specify the specialization. A chemical engineer, graduate of MIT, okay, making 6 figures, okay, working in the Northeast, okay, with citizenship, okay, and they have all of these what? Specifications, and no place in that list of requirements is what? Is deen. They may even mention what? The skin color. Okay? Should be fair skin. Should be like that. And deen is nowhere mentioned in that. But then the result is we get that fair skinned guy, graduate of MIT, he has all those qualities, and he's abusive. He beats her within 1 inch of her life. Right? That's the corruption. That's the tribulation. Because when the young guy who had dark skin, and he was an engineer, but he was, I don't know what, give me another type of engineer. Huh? Mechanical engineer. Or even worse, he was a civil engineer. Yeah. Civil engineer. Oh, God. God. Civil engineer, dark skinned, wasn't Punjabi. Right? When he came, but he was religious though. But he was religious, comes from a religious family. Father was an alim. father's father was an alim, right? Praise. Okay? When he came, they shunned him. But they insisted on what? The guy who had all those qualities. And that guy had no deen. And he, abused the daughter. That's where the corruption comes in. That's one example out of many examples we could give. Where people, for example, they marry their children for every consideration other than what? Other than deen. So the first thing you need to be looking for is what? Deen. If you don't do that, there's going to be corruption. You're going to regret it. You're going to regret it. Ultimately, you're going to regret it. You don't marry for deen, you're going to regret it. Thumma ba'da dhalik, you want to marry someone who shares your religious perspective. So you can see eye to eye. So if you're very committed and you're one of those people who, I begin my day saying, how can I live this day for Allah? What am I going to do today that I didn't do yesterday, which is going to be what? Make me a better Muslim or bring me closer to Allah. And every decision I make, I think about, whether or not it's pleasing to Allah or not. If that's how you go through life, you probably shouldn't marry someone who's religious, but religion to them is like, I live life. And religion to me is like what? It's almost like salt and pepper that I sprinkle onto my life. It's like I'm living my life and then I have to do what? Sprinkle a little deen onto my life. If that's their attitude, then you guys aren't probably going to what? You're going to see eye to eye. You need somebody who shares your commitment and will push you and propel you. Otherwise, there's going to be what? There's going to be tension. There's going to be friction. And it may hurt you in the long run because you may feel like you have to acquiesce, all right, in order to get along with them. So that means you end up doing what? Sacrificing your commitment just to what? To get along with your spouse. Another thing you should consider is you want to marry someone who comes from the same type of family that you want to have. Okay? So if you have, if they come from a household where there's a lot of, for example, we talked yesterday about uquq al-walidain. So if you, for example, let's say a girl is interested in a boy, she goes to visit their home, and she sees that the boy does what? He disrespects his mom. What are you doing? Why are you cooking that? We got guests coming. They're not going to want that. Why are you doing that? He's like yelling at her, berating her, putting her down. That should be what? That should be a red flag. That this is the person who what? Mistreats his own mother. Is he likely to what? Respect you, treat you well? Okay? And then if he has that quality and our children inherit that behavior from him, they're not going to what? Treat me well. He might give me a son who will talk to me and treat me. You have to look at the type of family structure they come from and how that could do what? Influence and impact and ultimately what? Be inherited by the family that you ultimately create with that person. Think about that, the family that they come from. And it's a big mistake I think that we make is that we don't make a connection. I'm not saying that people can't break the mold. I'm not saying that. But you do have to take that into consideration. That people are a product of their environment, a product of what the families that they come out of. Broken home, no commitment to marriage, no respect for this union of marriage. Man, that kind of worries me that what this person is the first sign of trouble, they might just leave. You follow me? You do have to think about that and put that fi ayn al-i'tibar. You have to what? Have to consider that.
Maybe that has to be like in the discussion. Like if you see the person comes from like a single parent household, maybe the sister should talk to or the wali, they should talk to the brother and see what his mind is like. Because maybe he comes from that household and doesn't even know what a husband is supposed to even be like.
Right.
You have to talk to him and see whether.
But even talking to him, because people will always advertise themselves or market themselves in the best possible way. So sometimes it's not just talking, but it's also a lot of istikhara and sometimes erring on the side of caution. Thumma ba'da dhalik, we go to the second phase, which is before they're born, once they're conceived, but before they're born. And here you as parents, your job is first and foremost to recognize the gravity and significance of the responsibility you have voluntarily chosen to bear. You got to recognize the gravity and significance of the responsibility you voluntarily serve. You got to basically put your game face on now. And you've got to zone in and say, I'm going to be a father. I'm going to be a mother. What does that mean? You got to bring to mind that hadith where the Prophet said, Kullukum ra'in wa kullukum mas'ool. You're just adding now something else to be what? To be asked about. Okay? So now I got to put on my game face and I got to get serious about what that means. The responsibility that I've voluntarily taken upon myself and chosen to bear. Parenting in Islam is a very serious undertaking with potentially catastrophic consequences for the parent and for the child. You have to understand that. Okay, and you can't be a person who just takes it lightly. Also, you have to realize that the child that you're going to ultimately have, inshallah ta'ala, is an amana. They are a trust. What is a trust? Trust is something that's of value that somebody gives to you. And then you are expected to return it to them in the same way or better condition than the way you received it. That's a trust. That's an amana. I have to give this thing back to that person the same way I received it, or what? Or better. And how did you receive the child? You received them what? Muslim. You received a child that was Muslim muti'a. Muti'a lillah. A child which was Muslim, obedient to Allah, submitting to Allah. That's what you received. As the Prophet said in the hadith, kullu mawludin yuladu al-fitra. فَأَبَوَاهُ يُهَوِّدَانِ أَوْ يُنَصِّرَانِ أَوْ يُمَجِّسَانِ. He said, every child is born upon fitra. Ibn Hajar said, fitra here means al-Islam. Every child is born a Muslim. And it's his parents who make him a Jew, or a Christian, or a Magian. It's the parents who corrupt the fitra. Okay, the child came to you pure, with no defects, and with no deviant understandings about Allah and the deen. It's you, because of the environment you created, that what? Corrupted the child. And that's why some of the scholars, they said, الصبي أمانة عند والديه وقلبه الطاهر جوهرة نفيسة ساذجة خالة من كل نقش عن كل نقش وصورة وهو قابل لكل ما نقش ومائل إلى كل ما يمال به إليه. So they say, for example, that a child is an amana, a trust, something which has been entrusted to the parents. And his pure heart is like a precious gem, innocent, naive, and free of every image, likeness, or inscription, like a clean slate. His heart, because of its innocence and naivety, accepts and welcomes in every image, and it inclines toward whatever it is exposed to and persuaded toward. So basically, the heart is pure, it's clean, and we're the ones who what? Who inscribe on it. We're the ones who what? Who form it and fashion it. And so we have to be very careful in dealing with this what? With this amana. طيب. We also have the hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ, he said, لا يسترع الله عبدا رعية قلت أو كثرت إلا سأله الله عنها يوم القيامة. He said, Allah has not placed any person, any servant of his over a people, made him responsible for anyone, including his child. Whether it's a large group or a small group of individuals, one child, several children, except that Allah will ask him about that amana on the day of judgment. أقام فيهم أمر الله أو أضاعه. Did he fulfill Allah's command towards that amana or neglect his duty? حتى يسأله في أهل بيته خاصة. Until he will ask him about the people of his household specifically. He's going to ask you about what? About those children, about that amana. I gave you this child Muslim. Did you give it back? Just as good or better? Allah's going to ask you. So you have to realize that before they're born. You've conceived them, you know they're coming, okay. Now you know what your job is. طيب, Once the children are born, stage number 3. Children are born. And even while they're fit tariq, as we say, on the way, the first duty at this stage is to make dua for them. And this will continue from this stage all the way to what? Till they die or you die. And we find this in the way of the prophets, alayhi salatu wasalam. The prophets were what? Keen to pray for what? Their offspring. So for example, Ibrahim, he said, Rabbi habali min as-salihin. He said, oh Allah, gift me a child from the righteous. Give me a righteous child. Zakaria, he prayed, Rabbi habali min ladunka dhurriyatan tayyibah. He said, oh my Lord, gift me from you a fine, a good child. And Allah describes Ibadur Rahman, his pious slaves, with many descriptions. One of them, he said about them, is that they pray, رَبَّنَا هَبَ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ وَاجْعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. That they pray, O our Lord, gift us wives and children that will be the coolness of our eyes and make us all leaders of the pious. So you see, they prayed for what? They prayed for their offspring. They prayed for good offspring, and they prayed for them after what? After they were born, that Allah would what? Make them righteous, make them good, make them from the pious, etc. The second thing we have to do at this stage, from the time that they're born until the time they reach discernment, we have to do what? Set a good example. Okay? Behave in front of them the way we ultimately want them to behave. Why? Because children at this stage, they will do as you do. And what they see you do will be very habit forming for them. Okay? What they see you do will be very habit forming for them. All right. Somebody tell me something you do. It's maybe like a gesture or something basically that you do without even realizing that you do it. So maybe some people, they'll do something like this all the time. So they have like a little gesture, a little thing that they do all the time. And then you find what? Your child doing. Give me an example. Somebody give me an example. I do this all the time. My child does it too. So for example, some people might do what? They scratch their nose all when they're trying to think or something. They'll do like this, and then the child, they start doing that. Does that happen? Certainly it happens. Okay? Father does like this, and that child is what? Like this. Right? It happens. Children do what? They see you do something and they what? They do it. And because they love you so much, one of the ways that they show their love at that age is by what? By imitating you. So you go, for example, every time you hear that little adhan clock off in the house, you go and get a rug, you put it out in a particular place, room in the house, and you start to what? To pray. So pretty soon what happens? As soon as that clock goes off, the child's, a little toddler, running to where the rugs are, grabs one of them, Salli, Salli, right? Time for prayer. Lays out the rug and starts what? Starts trying to pray. Because they've seen you do that, 100 times. Is that not so? It happens. So you have to set a good example, because that example is going to be habit forming for what? For the child. If you do a bunch of bad stuff, they're going to do that bad stuff. And you're going to have to try, now you're going to have to try to do what? Undo the damage you did by what? Setting a bad example. But if you set a good example, they're going to do what? They're going to follow suit and do as you did. ثم بعد ذلك, we go to stage number 4. Once they reach the age of discernment, they're old enough now to be instructed, digest, process those instructions, and act on them. They're old enough for that. That's what we call discernment. 7, 8, depends on the child's development, But right around that age, what? I can tell them some things. They can process the information and act on it. They each reach the age of what? Discernment. We call it in Bil-Arabi tamyiz. When that happens, your first job as a parent is what? To teach. You got to teach them now. You got to start instructing them now. It's not just do what I do. It's not what? I'm actually going to actually teach you. But I teach you what? Age-appropriate information. I don't go get Kitab Al-Aqid Tahawiyya, for example, and I open it up and I start reading, right? Okay? No, a child, that's not age-appropriate. Child can't digest that, can't process that. But I give them something what age-appropriate that they can learn. That's another thing too. Parents make a big mistake. They're always saying, "What? Oh, they're children. Oh, they're children." And they keep saying that till they're grown. It's too late to teach them. It's like you can teach a child. Believe it or not, children can learn a lot. They have an enormous capacity to what? To learn things. There are children who have an Arab father, an American mother, a maid from the Indo-Pak subcontinent, and a teacher who teaches French in school. And they learn all four what? All four languages. So they can speak to the maid in Urdu, mom in English, dad in Arabic, and the French teacher in French. Amazing capacity what? To learn things. As long as it's what age? Age appropriate. So you can actually teach them. That's why when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, قُوا أَنفُسُكُمْ وَأَهْلِيكُمْ نَارًا وَقُودُهَا النَّاسُ وَالْحِجَارَةُ I'm sorry, not tijara, hijara, astaghfirullah. طيب, he said, protect. He says, "Oh, you believe, protect yourselves and your families from a fire, the fuel of which is men and stones." Ali ibn Abi Talib, he explained what it meant. He commented on the ayah and he said, it means عَلِّمُوهُمْ وَأَدِّبُوهُم. He said it means teach them and discipline them. It means teach them, actually teach your children and discipline them. And the Prophet ﷺ, he practically demonstrated this. You know, the Prophet ﷺ, he married, when he went to Medina, he married several women. Most of them widows, some of them widows with what? Children. Among them, Salama had a son, Umar ibn Abi Salama. She had a son. The Prophet fostered him, brought him up like his own what? Son. To the point that Umar ibn Abi Salama, he said, "Kuntu ghulaman fi hajr al-Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam." He said, I used to be a young lad in the custody and care of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. وَكَانَتْ يَدِي تَطِيشُ فِي الصَّحْفَةِ. He said, and my hand used to do what? Used to go all over the place when I ate. Okay, I didn't have any table manners. When there was food, I would be like, man, snatching from here and from there. I didn't have table manners. Okay? He said, فَقَالَ لِي رَسُولُ اللَّهِ sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, the Messenger of Allah said to me, he would grab my hand and say, Ya ghulam, O little boy, Sammillah, say Bismillah, Kul biyaminik, eat with your right hand, wa kul mimma yalik. Don't let your hand go all over the place, just eat what? Eat from the place which is closest to you in what? In the sahan. This is a young boy, maybe 7, 8 years old, but the Prophet taught him what? The basic, fundamental etiquettes of eating at 8. He'd say, oh, he's a child, let him be. When he gets older, okay, we'll send him to university and they'll teach him how to eat. Right? So the Prophet said he can understand this. This is age appropriate. Sammillah, kul biyaminik, kul bima yalik. You know what Umar said? Umar said? He said, فَمَا زَالَ تِلْكَ طِعْمَتِي بَعْدِ. He said, from that day when the Prophet taught me, I've eaten that way. From that day up until what? Until this day. He was able to process that and practice it from that day forward. So these children can learn stuff, and we have to what? We have to teach them. But we also have the hadith of Rubai' bint Mu'awwad, one of the female companions of the Prophet ﷺ, in which she said that when the Prophet ﷺ commanded the fasting of Yom Ashura, the 10th of Muharram, which is known as Ashura, when the Prophet commanded that fasting of that day, She said we used to fast it. And we would also make what? Make our young ones fast. In order to what? To teach them and to get them in the habit of what? Fasting. So children, even though they're 8 or 9 years old, they can do what? Fast. And it can be habit forming for them. So we would make them fast, and when one of them would cry and complain of hunger, we would do what? Give them a toy to distract their attention until what? Until it was time to break fast. We also have the hadith collected by Abu Dawood on the authority of Amr ibn Shu'aib and Abihi and Jaddih, that the Prophet said, Muru awladakum bis salat wa hum abna sabi sinin. Ila akhir al-hadith. He said, order your children to pray when they're what? 7 years old. Teach them how to pray. They can do this. They can process information. They can learn how to what? To offer the prayer. So all this teaches us that at this stage, we need to be teaching our children the deen. Teach them. Practically teach them how to what? To practice the deen. Another thing we need to do at this stage is create an environment conducive to their proper Islamic development. You have to create an environment which is conducive to their proper development. Why? Because people are products of what? Their environment. And this is that stage we said where they're what? They're like clay. You can still mold them now. And what's going to help you mold them? Can you do it by yourself? No, it takes a village, right? You need a community. You need a environment which is conducive. That's not easy to do in America, but we have to what? We have to do our best, because the environment's going to what? Influence. It's going to be another hand, right? Shaping and molding. And we want that hand that's helping us shape, that's shaping and molding to be helping us and not what? Being counterproductive to what we're trying to what? Form and fashion. And we mentioned the hadith yesterday, we'll mention it again today, that indicates or underscores the fact that people are product of their environment. The hadith where the Prophet said, or the hadith of the man who killed 99 people, in which the Prophet said that when that man went to a genuine scholar, he told him, he said, a man has killed 100 people, can he repent? And the scholar said, Na'am, wa ma yahulu bainik wa bain at-tawbah. He said, of course, what can come between you and repentance? And he told him what? In talabi la ardi kada wa kada. Fa inna biha unasan ya'budun Allah ta'ala. فَاعْبُدِ اللَّهَ مَعَهُمْ وَلَا تَرْجِ إِلَى بَلَدِكَ فَإِنَّهُ بَلَدْ سُوءٍ. He said, go to such and such land, because in that land there are pious people who worship Allah. Go and worship Allah with them. Do not return to your land, because it's an evil place. In so many words, what's he telling them? People are products of what? Their environment. Our children are going to be products of environment. So we have to create what? An Islamic environment, to the best of our ability. It may just be in the home. We're doing things. And obviously, if we can do it beyond the home, that's perfect. But at least in the home, we're creating what? An Islamic atmosphere, an Islamic environment. Another thing at this stage, avoid common errors. Avoid common errors. What are some of those errors? Contradictory behavior. Contradictory behavior. Children at this age are more likely to do what you do rather than what you say. I gave an example yesterday, we'll repeat it today, that what happens to some people, they'll tell their child, don't lie, don't lie, don't lie, don't lie. But then they get that phone call from somebody they don't want to talk to, and they say, hey, tell them I'm not at home. You just what? Contradicted yourself. You said, don't lie, but you're what? You're lying. So this is critical too, that you have to avoid contradictory what? Behavior, because children are more likely to do what you do, not what you say. They have also negative subliminal messages. Negative subliminal messages. So you do something or say something or behave in a certain way which sends the wrong message to your children. So I'll give you an example. You have some people who they have a what's the word I want to use for this? They practice almost like a closet racism. A closet racism. You can help me with a better term, Musa. In closet. Huh?
Discriminatory?
It's racism is discrimination, but their racism is not overt, it's more covert. Is that better? Mm-hmm. Covert racism.
Clandestine.
Okay, clandestine, covert. They have a covert racism. They have it, and they say things around the house, they do things around the house that lets you know how they feel about people of other ethnicities and other races, etc. And they're sending a negative subliminal message to their child with that being discriminating, being prejudiced is what? Is okay. But they themselves, they don't do it in public, okay? Because they know that's not politically correct. But then when they go to the mosque and that child's confronted with a child of another race who wants to play, they won't play with them. They won't be nice to them. And they may even say some of those things that the father says what? In the home, they'll say it what? In a place where the father would never say it. Like, why does the child do that? Because they receive these negative what? Subliminal messages, and now they're acting out on that. And I've actually seen this play out in the parking lot of a mosque where a father's pleading to the child, why does he want to be here? He just wants to be your friend. Why didn't you shake his hand? Why didn't you say hello to him? Why didn't you talk to him? He said, I don't want to shake his hand. I don't touch him. And now the father's got to deal with that, which is a problem that he himself what? He created. He created that problem. But another hazard is spoiling, which is a great crime committed by parents against their children. Spoiling. Granting them their every request, responding to their every whim. When children ask for halal things, whether it's clothes, shoes, toys, technology, their parents what? They always oblige them. They just can't say no to their children, regardless of the expense or the absence of a real need. You just got the iPhone 7 last March, right? Well, no, they got the iPhone 8. It's September, because it comes out, I think, is it September it comes out? I don't know, I don't even have one. Huh? So anyway, it comes out annually once a year, I guess, and it's been, 6 months? They just got a new one, and it's like, I want the newest one, right? And they just can't say no, right? They can't say no. But what happens as a result is the children grow accustomed to getting their way and expect their parents to say yes even when they ask for something which is haram. That's what happens when you do what? You spoil them. You teach your child what ultimately you do is that you teach your child to what? To follow their desires and to do whatever their whims tell them. And that could potentially be their what? Their undoing in this world and in the hereafter. Another thing that you have to avoid is the effect of what? Media. And media is so many things. Media is the internet. Media is social media. Media is video games. Media is the television. Media is so many different things. And there's studies that show that children from 8 to 18 spend about 7.5 hours daily using some form of media. That's a lot of influence, man. So you got these games, right? These games that they spend a lot of time on that have lots of graphic violence. Child sits in front of that for 7.5 hours or 3.5 hours or 4 hours or whatever. You don't think that influences their personality, influences the way they think? You don't think seeing a bunch of nudity influences the way that they think, their desires, their emotions? You don't think watching a show which promotes alternative lifestyle, you don't think that affects their own sexuality? You don't think that? So you have to be careful about one of the hazards that's going to undermine what you're trying to achieve with your children, which is what? The media. Okay? And the more you allow media to influence, the less influence you're going to be able to have. Another danger or hazard or common error is the public school. Public school. Average child from 6 to 18 spends how many hours daily in school? Say it again. 8. 8 hours a day in a 24-hour day. How much time do they spend sleeping? 10. How much time do they spend talking to you, actually interacting with you, and you being in position to influence them?
15 minutes.
Probably. That's not far off. That's not actual interaction. It's probably right around there, if that. So I'm asking you, isn't that a huge disproportion? Isn't that, a huge disparity? How can you make up the difference? All the influence that they're getting from what? From the public school, and you're not able to counteract that with 15 minutes. It's just not possible. So that's another hazard that we have to be careful of. We have to avoid is what? The influence of what? The public school. Because what are they learning in public school? They're learning about Darwinism. You don't think that shakes people up? You don't think that shakes people up when they study Darwinism and then they come to the masjid or Sunday school or whatever, and they talk about how Allah created, everything, and they start to say, yeah, exactly. They start saying things like that. Oh, well, how do you explain evolution? How do you explain this? How do you explain that? So they're learning about these things in school, and it's causing them what? Doubts. You have to think about this as a hazard. It's undermining. It's counterproductive to what you're trying to achieve. Last but not least, peers. Children from 6 to 16 get about 50% of their influence from what? From their peers. 50% from their peers. Are they getting the other 50% from you? No. And even if they were, it's still what? It's still not enough for you to have the what? I guess the majority vote, I guess. You don't have that if the 50% is coming from what their peers. So you need to have peers who their message, the peer pressure they apply is what? Is in step with what? The influence that you want to have, that you want to. So you need to know who your children's friends are. Okay? And you need to make sure that they're friends who their message supports the message that you want to convey. طيب. ثم بعد ذلك, we just want to underscore for this stage we just mentioned, it's the most critical stage because children are like what? At this stage, they're still like what? Play. This is the formative stage, and once they become young adults, they're going to go where? In the oven, and you're not going to be able to what? Shape them anymore. So what do we do once they reach young adulthood, the fifth stage? You need to keep your finger on what? On the pulse. Keep your finger on the pulse, how your child is doing and what they're thinking. It's not always going to be easy because children at this age, they usually withdraw from their parents. They're less talkative. When you ask them questions, they're very vague in their responses, if they respond at all. They become like onions that you have to peel back one layer at a time, right? But in spite of all these challenges, you still have to do what? Keep your finger on the pulse and try to know what's going on. Establish a friendly advisory type of relationship. We're friends, and I'm just an advisor. I'm just trying to help you. I'm not going to tell you what to think. I'm going to help you see how to think, how you should think, how you should process information to make what? An educated decision about what to do in every situation. Because I'm not always going to be there. If I tell you what to think, I won't be there when there's some issue that we haven't addressed. But if I tell you how to think, you'll know how to make the right decision in that situation, even though we haven't specifically talked about that matter. You're also going to have to encourage open discussion. You're going to have to basically tell your children, hey, you have an open door policy. You can talk to me about anything. And I mean anything.
You actually need to say that to them.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, they don't know that.
And you can't shy away from topics which you consider to be taboo, sensitive, or too explicit. So the child wants to talk about certain things. They need to talk about certain things. You should want them to talk about those things with you than with someone else. Especially, for example, there's a teacher at school, non-Muslim, who they just feel comfortable with. But it's a non-Muslim. With their non-Muslim thought process and their non-Muslim mindset. And they want to talk to someone about their sexuality. They want to talk to someone about alternative lifestyles. Do you want them really to talk to that non-Muslim teacher that they feel comfortable confiding in? Who's going to tell them, hey, be you, you know? And go where your heart tells you. Is that what you want? But that's what they're going to do if you tell them, hey, I don't want to talk about that. We can't talk about that. So if they need to have that conversation, you need to go, hey, just let me go get a drink of water, okay? Go get your drink of water, come back and sit down and what? Talk to them. But if you run away from it and they go and talk to somebody who's telling them about freedom, and some people are made like this way, and if that's how you're made, just embrace it. And they hear that message and they accept that message, and there's a mess that's made, then you're partly what? Responsible for the mess that might not be able to be cleaned up. طيب ثم بعد ذلك, last but not least, تفضل علي.
Just as a rule of thumb, as an investigator, one of the things that we used to say with Children's Protective Services is that if you're thinking about it as a parent, your child has already discussed it with others. Mm-hmm. So the thought, the stuff that you're thinking about, wondering if they're having that discussion.
SubhanAllah.
No, they're not having that discussion. They've already discussed it, and they've already
experimented. Maybe
they've already engaged in that. If you're already thinking about it, you have to take that approach that they've already engaged in it.
SubhanAllah.
So don't be afraid to, have these discussions, because they're likely already in the world of that, discussion.
May Allah protect us.
Yeah.
SubhanAllah. طيب, let me wrap up quickly, because I'll probably have to leave before the adhan. Otherwise, I'll be mahbus. Okay, so last thing I want to say here, reinforce the foundation you have laid by reminding. So you got to constantly what? Shower your children with reminders about the foundation that you've already laid. You've already laid the foundation if you did all those things in the stages that we talked about, but now you have to reinforce it. Remind them what you taught them about Tawheed, about the oneness of Allah, about Azamatullah, His greatness, how He's always watching, and the great reward that they'll get, for being pious as young people, and how important it is to preserve their chastity and not to do something that they'll regret for the rest of their life, and all those foundations, the importance of prayer, and realizing that no matter where you are and who you're with, Allah is what? Allah is watching you, and reminding those things all the time, not telling them again not what to think, but what? How to think. And then last but not least, you need to monitor without meddling. Monitor without meddling. I don't want to spy on you. And one of my teachers actually said, don't spy on them. But if you're walking past the monitor, okay, you have every right to what? Kind of just glance and see what's going on. You have every right to, just kind of, but without being what? Spying on them. Without making them feel that they're being watched or surveilled. But you have a right to monitor. You have a right to know what's going on so that you can step in and, like Ali said, prevent, something from happening. You kind of have to, like I said, keep your finger on the pulse. You have the right to monitor without meddling and without making the children feel they're under surveillance. Finally, I'm going to conclude by saying it's critical for parents to be united, to support each other, and have one uniform message and display a united front. It's a big problem, is that spouses have a tendency to create camps within the home. And one spouse wants to basically campaign and win a popularity contest with the children. And will do that by what? By basically undermining the other spouse, who's basically trying to raise good Muslim children. And so when that happens, one spouse is in effect undermining the other. And a house divided cannot what? Cannot stand. So if the father says, I don't want any television turned on in this house until the homework is done, the Quran is read, the chores are done, etc. And as soon as he leaves, the children ask, can we watch TV? And the mom said, yeah, but you better get it turned off before your dad comes home. I mean, that right there, and this is just a microcosm, this is an example, that right there, it's the undoing of the raising of the children. They've got to have each other's back. And this goes back to what we talked about in the spouse segment. It's like the woman has to let the husband lead. And if the wife is more strict, more committed, then the husband, there's no harm. In fact, he should follow what? Her lead in this area and support what she's doing and not undermine her and give the children things and do things with the children they shouldn't do because he wants to win what? A popularity contest. So this is critical. They need to be united. They need to have a united front. And if there is some difference about what they should be doing, and that can happen, there's some philosophical differences between the spouses about raising the children. They can have those discussions, but not in front of the children. When I tell the children something, you don't agree with it, support me in front of them. And then later on, in our own private quarters, you can say, hey, I really didn't agree with that. And this is why I didn't agree with that. And I think this is the course that we should take moving forward. And then, even then, he has to go and undo whatever what he did. The mother can't do it because if she does, it says they're not on the same page. And what? I can basically play her against him. So let's say, for example, that the father decides to punish the child for something. And then they discuss and say, no, I don't think you should have done that because of X, Y, and Z. He says, yeah, you're right. He's the one who has to lift what? Lift the punishment, not. They need to be on the same page. They need to be united because a house divided cannot what? Cannot stand. And I have seen the breakup of a family, and I have seen the straying of children because the parents did just this. And it's not just a one-off. It's something that happens what? It happens a lot. So this is what I wanted to mention about the raising of children in a non-Muslim society. And we'll have to stop there. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.